Hey everybody, Phil here. Welcome to the weekly news recap for the 23rd of March to the 12th of April 2026, which doesn't really make it weekly, but whatever, we'll move on. Anyway, so this 3 weeks, a couple of things have happened. Sorry, I've been away for a bit, but anyway, we're going to try to recap a few of these. So 3 weeks ago, Xbox had their partner preview. Just going to go through a couple of games that I thought might have been a bit interesting. So Hunter the Reckoning Death Wish is kind of a like a first-person shooter that's like set in the, what's it called? I can't remember now, but set in the same universe as Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse and stuff like that. And we have some more Wuthering Waves. The Expanse showed off a little bit of gameplay. It definitely makes it look a lot more like Mass Effect, which is pretty cool. I mean, the Mass Effect trilogy is probably one of the better video game trilogies. So having something that is attempting to do the same, sure, why not? So that's like The Expanse now, and Exodus, which is maybe a little bit more on the nose as a Mass Effect game, and I think Star Wars Zero Company is kind of giving a bit of like a Mass Effect vibe. Anyway, they showed off a little bit more gameplay. Well, I say gameplay, a lot of it was more like an introduction to the team, introduction to the party. I'm not entirely sure when in the Expanse story this takes place. Admittedly, I only ever watched the first season, so I wouldn't really have any idea, but there's certainly some stuff like that Blue Crystal thing from the first season, or they kind of teased it at the very, very end of the first season, so it's, I imagine, at least after that. Grave Seasons seemed like a kind of farming sim type thing that has maybe some graveyard, I guess, undertones, like seances and stuff like that. But it's still a kind of a Stardew Valley life sim deal, while at the same time trying to avoid being killed. There is like a murder mystery thing going on at the same time. And I thought I had heard, and I might be confusing this with a different game, but I had heard that it's somewhat random who dies over the course of your gameplay. So, like, it's not guaranteed that it's the same people every time at the same periods every time, kind of thing. Like, it is somewhat random, and then also somewhat dependent on choices you make. Anyway, that's out pretty soon. 14th of August. Serious Sam Shatterverse. It's kind of an interesting way to reintroduce Serious Sam. They're effectively taking all of the different kind of Serious Sam's art styles in some ways, and then some new ones, and kind of like having them like cross over in a way. So you got like a little bit more modern Serious Sam, and then like the like very old school versions of it, and then just some that, you know, are brand new, like Alien Serious Sam and stuff like that. There's a Serious Samantha in there somewhere, I'm sure. It's an interesting idea. Stranger Than Heaven showed off a little bit more. This is mostly just confirming that it's taking place across like 100 years or so, starting some stage in the 20s. Actually, I'm not even sure it's 100 years. It's more like 60 years, 80 years maybe. I think it starts in the 1910s and then like works its way all the way up to the 80s. Should only be 70 years. Anyway, showed off a little bit more of that. Super Meat Boy 3D release date announcement. It's actually out now. Forever Ago is Old Man Goes on a road trip. Ascent to Zero is kind of interesting roguelike, hack and slash roguelike. I could have sworn this was out already, but I think maybe it was in early access for a while. But the idea with Ascent to Zero is basically, yes, it's a roguelike, but it's also sort of a speedrun-y type thing, almost. Like, you're trying to basically get through this game as fast as possible, or get through the dungeons as fast as possible. So there's a big emphasis on speed, and on slowing down your enemies, and like time manipulation and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're into kind of roguelikes and hack and slashes, I would give that one a shot. Dispatch making its way to Xbox, which I think means it will be on basically everything at that point. Alien Deathstorm is, I think this is from Rebellion. So Rebellion at the moment would probably be best known for Atomfall. But they did originally make the Alien vs. Predator games back in the 90s at some stage, I think, which were very good first-person shooters, PC first-person shooters. And this is sort of them coming back to it. Now, it's not in the Alien universe, or the Predator universe, for that matter, but it is very much in the same kind of idea. Like, that's a Predator. Like, that's just a Predator. Or an alien, I guess, a xenomorph. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in this because it looks like it's a little bit survival horror and then a little bit a standard first-person shooter. So it might be an interesting one. Frog Squad is a friend slop thing, so it's a co-op extraction platformer type thing. That doesn't take itself very seriously. It's a very kind of slapstick thing. Bluey game, sure, why not? Stalker 2 is getting some DLC called The Cost of Hope. I don't really know much about the Stalker 2 story, so I'm not entirely sure how that fits in. Musa Dirty Face is, I think, Korean. I think it's at some period in Korea's history. Very ignorant of Korea's history, so I don't know when exactly this is meant to be. But there is a plague plaguing the people of Korea. You, as the emperor, I guess, has been tasked to undo this plague in some way. I think there's obviously some kind of mythical, metaphysical thing going on. But gameplay-wise, it's sort of Soulsy-ish looking. I think we get like a very brief amount of gameplay here at the end. Maybe we don't even get that. A very small amount. So I think they're going for a Soulsy type thing. But it's kind of, like it's very small amount of gameplay here. Maybe Neo is a bit closer. Maybe even Dynasty Warriors is a bit closer, entirely sure. But I think they are going for like an action RPG, Neo, Black Myth Wukong maybe kind of thing. Anyway, we'll see how that works out for them. Eternal Life of Goldman is now coming to Xbox as well, and there's a demo available for it. I could have sworn it was already announced, but I guess not. Vaunted is a kind of interesting tactical RPG that I think plays differently depending on which character you're taking as your main character, effectively. I think the party all runs together in once, but like you designate which one of them is the captain, and then the story plays out from their point of view. I think that's the gist of it. But for the most part, it's an XCOM-like tactical RPG. Maybe not the Final Fantasy Tactics. Maybe it's probably a bit closer, because I don't think it has permadeath. Anyway, it looks colorful. It looks nice. Hades 2 is gonna come to Xbox Game Pass. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then kind of the game that rounded it out was Artificial Detective. This is a brand new game from a bunch of veteran developers. I forget which studios they're veterans of. There's a slightly longer, I think, trailer out there somewhere. That's a little bit longer, has a little bit more to it. But for the most part, it does seem to be a android guy with one of the last human children, I think, and it's kind of figuring out what happened to humanity way back whenever. It looks very pretty. It does look like almost like a DreamWorks film in some ways. Gameplay wise, it does look like it's a pretty standard over-the-shoulder shooter. Whether there'll be anything really setting it apart other than its visuals, I don't know. It's got a robot dog, so it's got that going for it. Anyway, that's years away, as far as I remember. 2027. It's exactly 1 year away. Anyway, that was the Xbox Partner Showcase. Then this week, we had the AAA Initiative Showcase, which is a little bit longer. The AAA Initiative is kind of the indie version of, I don't know, Opening Night Live or the Games Awards or something like that. Anyway, we won't go through all of these because there's a lot of them. Prove You're Human is an interesting one, though. So this is from the developers behind 1000 Times Resist and Slay the Princess. Both two games that have a very, very strong storyline. And from the looks of things, it will be very similar for Prove You're Human. The idea is this robot that you could argue is a GLaDOS in some ways that is convinced it's human. Like it has all of the characteristics required, the Turing test kind of vibe to it. And the game is sort of you trying to prove that they're not, while at the same time trying to prove you are. And the kind of difficulties arising thereof of trying to say why you're human and this robot isn't, even if you can't necessarily point out the exact reasons and exact stipulations, I suppose, for being a human being. I don't know, it's very interesting, and the behind the scenes was very illuminating as well. And we had Alcahest. This is allegedly a gameplay reveal trailer. It is absolutely not a gameplay reveal trailer. The game does not play this way. It definitely does not. Absolute bullshit. But okay, let's go with that. I'm going to skip ahead to the combat bit. This is could not possibly be more scripted bullshit. There's no way the game plays this way. If it does, I'd be happy to be wrong because it would be incredible, but there's no way. There's no way it plays like this. Anyway, Alcahest has been teased for a good while now. Horrible arse on that thing. I don't think it has a release date. Like, it's been wishlist now for 2 years, maybe at this point. Feels like vaporware. Anyway, Lost Railway is a Franslop thing, only it's 2D. Kind of the gist of it. Cairn is getting some more DLC. Castlevania Belmont's Curse had a little bit more gameplay shown off, and there's commentary in this video, but obviously you can't hear it. But I encourage you to check it out. And there's a pretty cool interview between like Konami and Evil Empire, just talking about how they worked together and how they felt Dead Cell's version of Castlevania was really good, and they were like, yeah, why don't you guys make a full-on Castlevania kind of thing. And they were very quick to point out that it's not a roguelike. It's a proper Castlevania game. Spacecraft, I don't even remember. I assume it's some kind of factory thing. I don't remember. Anyway, Rise of the Necrodancer is getting Undertale music, which I think is already live at this point. Thick as Thieves. So this isn't necessarily new, but I did want to show this off because the game has actually changed quite a bit since when it was announced. So this is Warren Spector's latest game, probably best known for Deus Ex and Thief. And Thick as Thieves, when it was announced, it was going to be a PvEVP or PvPvE, whatever way you want to put it, kind of stealth thief thing, where you would be competing and or cooperating with other thieves to collect various things across different maps. And you'd have to deal with the guards, sure, but you'd also have to deal with other thieves trying to steal the things you were trying to steal, and also maybe getting betrayed, double-crossed by other thieves on your team, and so on. Now, it turns out that has changed. It is now going for basically only PvE. So the game will be either single player or cooperative multiplayer, but there won't be a competitive multiplayer thing to it. I know that some people are disappointed with that. I am not. I'm like, yes, thank you. Finally. Whether it'll work out for them or not, I don't know. But I mean, if they had shipped a mode where it was strictly PvE, I would have been happy with that too. But they've made the decision not to go with PvP. Not entirely sure why, but anyway, they've decided to do that. So, did they say there was a test? Or is it just a release date? I can't remember now if this was a playtest or it's a release date. No, it's a release date. Okay, so end of May. We have Romestead, which is a kind of base builder type thing, only set in, Rome. Or post Rome, really. From what I can glean from the trailer, at least, it seems that this is after the fall of Rome. Super Battle Golf is party golf, where you can beat the shit out of your opponents. Basically, it's almost a race, or more than it is golf. It does look like fun, but again, it does seem like it's something you will need friends for. Frostrail looks like another kind of, to me anyway, friend slop, even if it's not like the kind of fun and cartoonish friend slop we're somewhat used to at this point. It's a little bit more of a kind of extraction survival thing, of you getting on the train and then, you know, collecting a bunch of shit in those different environments and then getting back to the train. But it does have that kind of loop to it. Crop's an interesting one. So Crop, at least the trailer at least begins making it seem like it's some sort of crime thriller drama thing where you're just dumped out of the back of a car boot and just made to farm crops. It was eventually transpire that, yeah, it does seem like this is some kind of prison situation. But the crops that you're farming are maybe not your standard food crops. They might be growing different things, and it does seem like you are also helping out some kind of criminal enterprise. Like there's parts in this trailer where I think you like dig graves for people and stuff like that as well. So not entirely sure what's going on. And the key art for the game has the guy in a hazmat suit, so there's clearly some other horrible shit going on here. Anyway, interesting setup. It's like an anti-Stardew Valley in some ways. Machine Party is from the Buckshot Roulette guys, and it's effectively Mario Party but more violent. So I think the deal is, Squid Game. In that, you know, you have different games that all of you are playing through, and if you lose, you just get shot in the face, kind of thing. But it is kind of the Mario Party thing of just play a game. But obviously the consequences for losing are a little more dire this time around. Anyway, that's Machine Party. Windrose does look pretty cool. I know a lot of people have been playing the early access version of it because it was announced at AAA Initiative that the early access was a go. It does very much look like multiplayer Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which honestly, why Skull and Bones wasn't that, I don't know, but here we are. So it's fine, I'll do it myself. Grabs the Infinity Gauntlet. Anyway, that's kind of what it seems like it's aiming to be, just like a multiplayer Black Flag or a Sea of Thieves that's a little bit more gritty, a little bit more on the loot side. Yeah, from what I've seen from the early access previews anyway, people are digging it. Over the Hill is just talking about its next biome, or not its next biome, just revealing another biome. The game isn't actually out yet, so I keep thinking the game's out and it's not. Starseeker Astroneer Expeditions, it's like a multiplayer Astroneer, but it's a little bit more base buildy, I guess. Shift at Midnight is the kind of horror streamer slop, we would have called it back in the day. Streamer bait, I suppose it would have been it, where you're running a supermarket and the people coming in, you need to check their details, so it's a bit papers please, and if you fuck it up, you're attacked by these weird like doppelganger clone things. Dead as Disco was shown off a good while ago, but I had like completely forgotten about it, to be honest. But it is a rhythm action kind of brawler, so not unlike Hi-Fi Rush, but kind of different, or at least this is how the developer is billing it, is that you don't actually have to attack on the beat. It's that the game's code will just change what attack your character does to make it so that it attacks on the beat. So you can still play it like a standard brawler game, and the game's underlying code will just make sure it lands on the beat. Now, how that works in practice, I don't know. I imagine it will feel pretty good to have your attacks landing on the beat and stuff like that. But if you're expecting an attack to come out quickly and it's actually taking a little bit longer, that means you get hit just so you can land on the beat. I don't know how nice that will feel. This one's really a case of give me a demo because I don't really know how it's going to play. What does seem fun, though, is whatever way their underlying tech is working, like it will work with any music, which is really interesting. Anyway, early access for that one beginning in May. Barotrauma is getting a new expansion. Honestly don't know a whole lot about Barotrauma. Lost Castle, similarly, I don't really know much about that. Seems like a Castle Crashers thing. Sledding game is, again, I know I keep saying friend slop as if it's a derogatory thing. I don't really mean it that way. It's just, that's almost the name of the genre in some ways. It's you get a bunch of friends together, you have a good time. And the game itself doesn't have a ton of substance to it, I suppose. That's kind of what I'm going for. Solarpunk has a release date. It's solar-powered Stardew Valley in some ways. Anyway, 8th of June. Warhammer Survivors, they're saying this is an announcement. I could have sworn this had already been announced. Maybe the console version hadn't been announced yet. But yeah, it's Vampire Survivors, but the Warhammer universe. That's the only difference. Everwind, I don't... Looks like Minecraft. I'm going to say, I don't know, I don't remember it. Away Team is getting a co-op partner, so you can play it multiplayer. I think it's still only 2 people though at most. I don't think you're not going to get like 4 teams or anything like that. Valor Mortis showed off a little bit more gameplay. There's a lot more parkour elements to it. It showed off like a grappling hook thing as well. So it's not quite the... I mean, it still is a first-person Souls-like kind of thing, but they're definitely leaning into the developer's previous game, which is the Ghost Runner games, which was very fast-paced first-person parkour. So there's definitely still a lot of that in the game, and we didn't see a lot of it in the demo or in the playtest, but certainly in these other kind of snippets you're seeing here of the gameplay, there's a lot more of it. And some different enemies showing off and stuff like that as well. So there's clearly a lot more to it than the kind of blasted battlefields that the playtest was on. Long Gone, I'm not entirely sure what kind of game Long Gone is exactly. It kind of looks like a 2D Last of Us. And that was the sort of vibe I got from the trailer. But anyway, it's going to be launching 2027, so it's still quite a ways off. Temtem Pioneers is Palworld. And Palworld was Pokemon. So Temtem Pioneers is like a couple of... And I know Temtem itself was already Pokemon, so there's a weird like circular thing going on here, triangular thing going on here. Brotato's getting some more DLC, just dinosaurs and robot dinosaurs. Far, Far West. I don't remember what kind of game this was. It's like a first-person... It was like a first-person shooter, but was it like a co-op thing? Was it single player? I don't know. No, it looks like it's co-op. I don't remember, to be perfectly honest. 1 to 4 player Wild West, but your robots thing. Okay. Graveyard Keeper 2, sequel obviously to Graveyard Keeper, which was free on Steam for a while. Hopefully you got that news because I wasn't around to tell you. But Graveyard Keeper is very much another kind of anti-Stardew Valley. You're keeping a graveyard, which means you're burying people and tending their graves and stuff like that, but you're also getting to know the townspeople and that kind of thing. Graveyard Keeper 2 looks like it's doing that again, but also there's a bit of like a zombie threat coming to the town, so there's a little bit of like tower defense going on as well. We Were Here Tomorrow is a little bit like, it's not, I was going to say Portal 2, but it doesn't have like the Portal mechanic, but the idea is like 2 lads dealing with science shenanigans, and there's time travel shit because it's We Were Here Tomorrow kind of thing. Clover Pit's getting some more DLC. The Lift is sort of Space Janitor, the game, in some ways. You're thrown into this building, you're effectively the mechanic to like fix all of this shit. I keep skipping the gameplay bits, but it's a lot of like fixing the place up, like House Flipper, Power Wash Simulator, various other kind of simulator type games, just to get the place up and running again. That's kind of the gist of the game, but it is a little bit like Dead Space without the necromorphs. Like if Isaac Clarke had to do his job, his actual job, Space Janitor, and not fight necromorphs, that kind of feels like that's what the Lift is. Alabaster Dawn's the next game from the Crosscode developers. And I think it's been shown off a couple of times. But it's a pretty impressive, like, isometric 16-bit, 32-bit RPG. But yeah, it looks pretty cool, and still looks pretty cool. And there's a early access happening beginning of May. Risk of Rain 2 is getting some DLC. Too Deep to Quit. That's what she said. Is Friendslop again. It's you're going digging for valuable treasures in a not Egypt kind of thing, in a tomb, and things are happening and you're getting caught in traps and stuff like that, but it's Lethal Company, effectively. Neverway has a prologue demo available now on Steam, and the game itself will be launching at some stage in October. This game looks really good. It's like the artist from Celeste and music from some other really good game that I can't remember, but everything I've seen from it looks really impressive. Final Sentence is kind of a roguelike in some way, but it's a typing game as a roguelike. You're all just given a bunch of things to type out, and if you fuck up, you die. That's it. Like if you make a typo or you take too long or something like that. It's a fun addition to the concept. I think this was the last game, Don't Starve Elsewhere, which is just the next Don't Starve game. So there's Don't Starve, then Don't Starve Together, and now Don't Starve Elsewhere, which is just puts you somewhere else, but it's the same type of game. A slightly difference is that the game is kind of in 3D. So there is like vertical elements to it. You can climb up and down different elevations and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's the Don't Starve gameplay that you're probably well used to and you know pretty well at this point. Anyway, that was the III initiative. So some pretty cool things out of that. Then some updates outside of that. So the PlayStation Plus monthly games are out already. Lords of the Fallen, Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 remastered, and some Sword Art Online game that I don't understand. The Lords of the Fallen game got a pretty beefy update recently. It's probably one of its last updates that it's going to get, but Lords of the Fallen is effectively a Soulsy type game. The kind of unique thing about the Lords of the Fallen game is that it takes place across two different realms that you can swap between, like Soul Reaver. The kind of thing that made me really interested in it, but everything I had heard about Lords of the Fallen outside of that was that it was cheap, as in unfair. Whereas Dark Souls feels like it's unfair, but it's not. Whereas Lords of the Fallen feels like it's unfair, and it is. Now, I think that has been changed, but there's been a lot of balance patches since then. Might go back to it now, and especially if it's already part of the monthly games. I don't necessarily have to pay anything extra to check it out, so I might do that. Tomb Raider 1 to 3 remastered, I already own, because I'm like that, but anyway, I still haven't played it. But it's the original 3 Tomb Raider games from back in the 90s, remastered. They look nicer. They've added modern controls that absolutely break the game. Don't use them. I know the tank controls are difficult to get to grips with, but the game was designed with them in mind. It was not designed with analog controls in mind, and you can tell. And then Sword Art Online, I don't understand, and I'm not going to attempt to understand. I'm going to move on. The Xbox Game Pass, Wave 1 for April. It's quite jam-packed, as you can see. The DayZ, can I make this bigger? No, this is as big as it gets. Okay, all right. So the DayZ game, or Day 7? I assume it's DayZ. It's like a survival zombie type game. I can't read what that says because it's too small, but it's a game preview for something Legend. Maybe I'll go back and read the article. Maybe that will help. Endless Legend, okay. Lead your evil to victory of an ever-evolving world strategy game. Okay, so it's Civ or any of those other kind of nation-building type games. FBC Firebreak is the Control live service game from Remedy that didn't do great, and from what I've heard still isn't doing particularly great, so maybe getting them added to Game Pass is giving them a bit of a cash injection. Planet Coaster 2 is Roller Coaster Tycoon, but make it modern, I suppose. Tiny Bookshop is like a kind of cozy just book recommending game, and like you're kind of running a little tiny library. Football Manager 26 twice. Don't know why. I suppose one of them's the console edition, but I feel like you could have probably could have just put these two together. Anyway, Hades 2 already out on PC. It's coming to PlayStation and Xbox 14th of April, so it looks like it's also coming to Game Pass. Replaced feels like it's been coming out for quite a while now. It will eventually be out next week. Thaumaturge is an interesting one. It's an isometric CRPG where your character is a sort of medium between like this demon realm and the regular world, and you can kind of team up with them to kind of or in combat you team up with them in a sort of Persona type way. You know, they bolster your abilities while at the same time they can attack themselves. The gist of the story is you're coming back to your childhood home, you find your father is dead, you suspect foul play, and there's maybe some demonic reasons for why that is. Oblivion remake, sure. Surprised it wasn't on Game Pass already. Some more sports games, Call of Duty, again, somewhat surprised it wasn't already on Game Pass. Is it My Little Rocket Town or something like that? What's it called? Shit. Hang on. Let me put this back to where it's supposed to be. Little Rocket Lab. Yeah, Little Rocket Lab, cozy machine building RPG. So it's a little bit, again, it's a little bit Stardew Valley, but you're building a rocket lab rather than a farm, but it's a similar type of thing. Sopa, Tale of the Stolen Potato is a kind of fun platformer game. Vampire Crawlers, I guess that's going to be a brand new release as well, because I don't think that's out yet. 21st of April. But it's Vampire Survivors, but way slower. It's like a dungeon crawler, very old school dungeon crawler. And Kiln, which is coming from Double Fine, is a kind of live service battling game where it's two parties of like clay vases and jugs and mugs and that kind of thing, and they fight each other, try to douse each other's kilns and stuff like that. It's a very silly game. Anyway, let that go. Those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you want to play something right now? Well, you've got Racoin, which is very much Balatro, but make it the coin falling game. But it's a very similar idea. It's just, you know, playing multiple different waves of it, adding a bunch of different modifiers so you get a shit ton of coins in one go and all this kind of stuff. It's if you've played Balatro, you know kind of what I'm talking about. Just apply the same thing to the coin dropper kind of game. Anyway, that's Racoin. We have Screamer, which it's a pretty cool driving game. That's also an anime TV show at the same time. So yes, there's like anime shenanigans going on, but underneath all of that is a just very impressive driving game. And I don't particularly like driving games all that much, but like this one was pretty good. And I do appreciate, because a lot of the things that throw me off driving games is that there's usually no story. And I do somewhat require a story to be interested in something. I need a reason for why we're playing and not just you're racing because you want to win. That's the me thing, I understand, and I do appreciate that it's in that for the game. But as I said, underneath the whole thing, there is still like just a really good driving game underneath it. Project Songbird, I forget now who the previous developer or what their previous game was. But this is a first-person psychological horror thing. You are a musician who's decided to take a step back from technology and civilization and so on to just focus on their next album. They've gone into this cabin in the woods and psychological shenanigans thereof. Now, I don't know if this is like a kind of cat and mouse horror game, but the premise is very, lends itself very well to horror tropes and so on. So I think it could be a decent idea, and the pedigree of the writers is pretty good. So Expecting some pretty good things from it, but I don't know. I haven't read the reviews, so I don't know exactly how well it was received. Anyway, that's Project Songbird. Unfortunately, I have read the reviews for this one. Samson: A Tindleson Story has not been received particularly well. So Samson is... I know a lot of reviews have labeled it as a GTA clone. I don't think that's necessarily fair. But the idea is you, at the beginning of the game, there's some deal goes really, really wrong, and you are now massively in debt to a criminal organization. And every day that you head out, you're there to collect debts for that criminal organization to work off your own debt. And if the day goes well, you know, you take a fraction of your debt off. And if the day goes wrong, you become even further in debt. And in some ways, you could argue there's a kind of commentary on how being poor is oddly very expensive, or ironically very expensive. But yeah, what I've seen from reviews, it's quite buggy, and the game is very one note. It's like you drive around, you beat up some guys, you drive somewhere else, you beat up some guys, and you drive somewhere else and you beat up some guys. That's kind of it. And again, the combat system isn't really deep enough to warrant like there really needed to be more to it. Again, that's what I'm getting from the reviews. I haven't played it myself, so I don't know, but I'll take their word for it. Minos is another Devolver Digital joint. It is kind of a Dungeon Keeper type game. So you are the Minotaur in the Minotaur's Labyrinth. You spend the first phase of the game setting up your traps, setting up the route that these heroes will have to come through. So it's a little bit of like base defense, tower defense, while the Minotaur themselves can roam the labyrinth and attack heroes and so on. So that's kind of the gist of it. It's like the waves of heroes become, you know, longer, the heroes become more powerful and so on, but you also have access to better traps and that kind of thing and other stipulations. And it's all just kind of, you know, can you make a labyrinth that will let you survive to the next round kind of thing. Like that's the gist of the game. Legacy of Kain Ascendance. So this is an interesting one in that this was kind of built with the Legacy of Kain Defiance remaster. And I think it was meant to come out at the same time, but some delay with it. It ended up coming out a little bit later. It attempts to retell the story of the Legacy of Kain series. And I say attempts because it adds a bunch of stuff that's not in those games. That's kind of unique to this game. And you can somewhat argue in the Legacy of Kain story, because it's so time travel heavy and it's so like paradoxes and changing the timeline and stuff like that, that you could argue that, you know, they're not adding anything new. This is just a different wrinkle in the timeline. Sure. I think some of the characterization of Raziel in particular, I don't really agree with. And they had the unfortunate problem of like Raziel's voice actor has passed away, so they would have had to get somebody new to voice Raziel, and he just, I'm sorry, you're not him. It's not right. I feel like they should have just gone with a completely different voice and not have somebody try to do a sound alike, because it doesn't really come off well. Overall, it's fine. I feel like if you were trying to glean the story of Legacy of Kain from this game, you wouldn't really get it unless you already knew the story. You know, like you're kind of seeing these bits and going, oh yeah, that's that part from Soul Reaver 1, or that's that part from Blood Omen, and so on. But if you didn't know that, I feel like you'd just be more confused. that's kind of where I'm coming from. And then gameplay wise, it's fine. You know, it's pretty serviceable as a side-scrolling beat 'em up. It's not doing anything amazing, really, and it has these weird 3D moments that are a bit strange. They just kind of come out of nowhere. It's fine, basically, is my answer to that. Anyway, last one, Darwin's Paradox, probably the first new IP from Konami in quite a while. The idea is you are an octopus, you are in a kind of fishery, I guess, where you're about to be chopped up, made for food, and you don't want that happening, so you're going to try to escape. That's kind of the gist of it. Again, what I've seen from the reviews, it's a pretty serviceable Limbo-like game, side-scrolling puzzle or a physics platformer kind of thing. I think like them just getting their legs, pun not intended, for like a new game from Konami. You know, this isn't another Silent Hill, it's not another Castlevania, it's not another Metal Gear, you know, it's a brand new thing. It's something to give them like the, you know, benefit of the doubt, and, you know, maybe they'll turn it around in the sequel or whatever. But I think from the reviews, at least, this seems like it's decent, if not like an amazing, you know, brand new top tier IP or anything like that. Anyway, unfortunately though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of the video game industry. So, unlike every other generation of console, the PS5 is only getting more expensive from when it launched. In fact, the cheapest time to buy a PS5 was the day it launched, because it is now going up in price. So Sony are taking a necessary step to ensure we can continue delivering innovative, high-quality gaming experiences to players worldwide. How many games have they released? How many games have they released this generation? And you can't count the like 5 times they released The Last of Us. That doesn't count. Anyway, starting 2nd of April, so it's already happened. And basically they've all gone up by 100. 100 currency. I mean, what the fuck are what the fuck are exchange rates, you know? Anyway, they've all gone up by 100 or so. So a PS5 Pro is now almost $1,000 or €1,000. So you can only imagine what a PS6 is going to cost. Now, the reason they're putting these prices up, they don't say it specifically, just necessary for whatever, but it is, for the most part, it is sourcing components for the console, and it really is just generative AI shit has pushed up the price of GPUs, it has pushed up the price of SSDs, it has pushed up the price of hard drives, it's pushed up the price of everything. Because those companies are willing to pay for chips and components that don't exist yet, that haven't been made. They've bought them ahead of time. And Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft even, being able to source those parts to make their own consoles is becoming more and more difficult. Valve themselves, trying to make their Steam machines, are finding the same issue. They might have to either jack up the price of what the Steam machine will be, or delay it until 2027, 2028, whenever the bubble pops. Any day now. Any day. Speaking of bubbles, Epic Games laying off over 1,000 employees, blames drop in Fortnite engagement. So this was quite a while ago now. Yeah, 24th of March. So they're laying off 1,000 staff as Fortnite's popularity continues to decline. We'll come back to that in a minute. I'm sorry we're here again. The downturn in Fortnite engagement that started in 2025 means we're spending significantly more than we're making, and we have to make major cuts to keep the company funded. This layoff, together with over $500 million of identified cost savings in contracting, marketing, closing some open role, yada, 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 yada. We want to have as many awesome developers creating great content and tech, but that's why we're going to lay off 1,000 of them. Okay, sure. They also mentioned in the message to staff that Epic's role in fighting tech giants like Google and Apple in court over in-app purchases has also led to them having to do layoffs. Nobody told you to do that. You did that all by yourself. And you did that to enrich yourself further. Because when it came time to it, when the court did side in your favor, you didn't pass those savings on to the customer. You just jacked up the price of V-Bucks. Being the industry's vanguard, we have taken a lot of bullets in a battle which is only in the early days of paying off for ourselves and all developers. Citation needed on that. It will pay off for literally just you and nobody else. Anyway, Fortnite's popularity continues to decline. So this is kind of, to be honest, as bad as it is, and it is terrible that people are losing their jobs because Tim Sweeney's a fucking idiot. Just deciding to randomly buy Bandcamp and do nothing with it. I mean, I'm sure we could have used some of that money Tim. Not making any new games since you started Fortnite. I'm sure that's helped a major amount too, Tim. Where's Quake? Bring back Quake. Anyway, this is kind of the big story, though. Fortnite's popularity continuing to decline, while so many video game executives and investors are trying to make Fortnite. And Fortnite itself isn't Fortnite anymore. You know, isn't the big forever game that people think it is, that will just print money forever. Like, it is seeing a decline. It is having its lunch eaten by Roblox for the most part. And it's continued kind of loss of identity in some ways. Like, what even is Fortnite now? What kind of game is it? It's just you're randomly seeing Captain America over there, and then Ryu is in there for some reason, and now Optimus Prime and Ariana Grande are like, what the fucking game is Fortnite? The fact that it is itself already and has allegedly been declining since 2025, according to Tim. I'd say it's longer than that. And yet, video game industry executives and investors will be like, no, let's make the next Fortnite though. Still trying. Not reading the room in any way whatsoever. Speaking of not reading the room, I'm not sure that's how it works. Anyway, Union Blast Greedfall 2 publisher over studio bankruptcies, years of mismanagement and strategic nothingness. So this is Nacon. Nacon are a kind of umbrella publisher for a bunch of different studios. Spiders, who make Greedfall, Cyanide, who make the Styx games, and Kyloton, who make the World Rally Championship games. And there's a bunch of other developers in there. And recently, Nacon had filed for, I think it was like emergency bankruptcy or something like that? They're basically filing for bankruptcy because they weren't able to pay their loans and their debts anymore because some expected cash injection didn't happen. Anyway, this is the developers working under them, and they're basically saying, like, this isn't a surprise. And it's entirely because of management, terrible decisions, not listening to the developers. You know, they have a history of doing this kind of thing. And it isn't just because this cash didn't show up. It's like this was almost inevitable in some ways. Anyway, so Greedfall, the Dying World studio behind it, is already facing insolvency. It's a Nacon-owned AA team. French Union represents them, is blaming management at the top for seeking to make a quick buck with no long-term strategy for these studios, their projects, and their teams. Nacon subsidiary Spiders, Kyloton, and Cyanide have all been unable to pay their bills. Spiders recently on Greedfall, you're talking about anyway. Their disdain for video game production and their incompetence actively sabotage studios which were viable until their acquisition and jeopardize projects with a high potential. This is years of mismanagement, strategic nothingness, both at the group and company levels, have blocked studios from modernizing, organizing, and developing themselves. Today, even after completely emptying its studio coffers dozens of millions euros, which should have ensured studio stability and safe jobs, Nacon comes out with a deficit. Makeshift solutions. I'm not sure if that was supposed. This might be a typo. Makeshift solutions, like I'm sure it's makeshift, but still, it's funnier to say this. Makeshift solutions, like canceling all recruitment and raises for more than a year. Snake Oil solutions like AI, which Nacon is gradually forcing on its studio without even knowing what for. They're not the only people doing that. Will not save money and clean up the company accounts. The deterioration of working conditions in the last years and the creation of new studios with the barely hidden goal of sabotaging existing ones were already convoluted ways of reducing headcount, and they only made matters worse. Congratulations, you played yourself, basically. Seems to be the gist of this. Speaking, though, of congratulations, you played yourself, Eidos Montreal announces even more layoffs. Even more indulgences for layoffs. For the third year in a row, as now the studio head is leaving. So I think you could probably say at this point that any of the games Eidos Montreal worked on, any developers who worked on those games, it's likely they're not there anymore. Anyway, 124 employees being laid off in the studio's latest annual round of cuts. So 124 employees as a result of changing project needs, whatever that means. Pretty sure the project needs to be made. No? Anyway, we're going to support those people impacted with care, and respect remains our priority. Sure, annual layoffs, but respect remains our priority. Okay. Then David Anfossi, who was studio head for years at this point. We thank David for his contributions, wish him the best in his future endeavors. A transition plan is underway. Further updates will be shared as new leadership is finalized. Who the fuck would want to take over at this point? Anyway, Eidos Montreal's announcement echoes a similar one made on the exact same day last year, where they said basically the same thing about this isn't a reflection of their talent, dedication, or whatever. Anyway, 3 annual rounds of cuts, which now makes a total of almost 300 people laid off in 3 years. And I thought this was incorrect, but looking back on it, it is actually true. The last full game that Eidos Montreal released was Guardians of the Galaxy in 2021. And everything they've worked on since then has been cancelled. But that new Tomb Raider game, that's definitely coming out. Anyway, speaking of games not coming out, I suppose, a year on from launching Wanderstop, Ivy Road are closing their doors after struggling to fund their next game. So this is more of an indication of where video game investment is effectively drying up, as a lot of investors are putting their money into shitty generative AI startups instead. So a little over a year after the game was released, the developer has been trying to fund their next game. In January of this year, it was announced that they had been unsuccessful. Layoffs were taking place as a result. Now the studio itself has had to close down. It's hard to put into words how thankful we are to have been able to work together on Wanderstop. This is an incredible group of people, and while we had a new project we were excited about, unfortunately the funding didn't come to fruition and the studio had to shut down. So yeah, this is kind of why you're seeing a lot of AA semi-independent studios having to close or lay people off and that kind of thing, because the money is just not coming in. And tech investment is going somewhere else. Generally, it's going into generative AI stuff. Not entirely. Some of them are just not in the market at all, or they are just invested heavier in other studios and stuff like that. But a lot of it is just not in the industry right now. Although speaking of money not being in the industry, Gunzilla CEO denies claims of not paying staff, rants about haters, and brags about crunch. So those are all very great things. So earlier in this week, multiple former and current Gunzilla employees claimed online that the company, which also owns Game Informer and runs the game off the grid, owes them months of back pay and is not communicating with affected staff. Good shit. Yeah, Gunzilla CEO called his critics haters, denied claims that his company hasn't paid full-time devs, and began bragging about crunch. Now, the funny thing is, he said they're not paying, or he said that they're haters for saying we're not paying our staff, and then says they're not paying their staff. CEO did not deny that some people aren't getting paid right away, but claimed this was only happening with contractors and not full-time employees. That makes it okay. And was only done to not disrupt company operations. That's not their problem, dude. You are legally obligated and required to pay people on time. That's part of their contract, even if they are contractors and not full-time employees. Today, there is a new narrative from haters that Gunzilla incorrectly laid off contractors or paid them with delays. However, to not disrupt company operations, some payments may be scheduled in a way that works for the company's cash flow, not always for everyone individually. So the haters are right. You aren't paying your contractors or and as we'll come to later, not paying their staff either. Full-time staff whose salaries over 6 years have never been delayed by more than a week. So they have been delayed. By half. This is also the full-time staff he's talking about now. And we're going back up here that claimed this is only happening with contractors and not full-time employees. And then actually it is happening with full-time employees. Cool. Anyway, after his rant, multiple employees claimed that Gunzilla had failed to pay them for months, many claiming that they're still owed back pay. Former VFX animator claimed he is owed months of pay. I foolishly worked for 3 extra months, the end of last year, with assurances that delays in payment would be resolved. Upper management promised that these delays were temporary and growing pains tied to being a new company with a new game. In December, the CEO himself had a call with my department where he promised us that invoices would be paid as soon as possible, that the company was profitable. It's interesting that he needed to put that part in, and that we were all doing the right thing by keeping quiet and continuing to work. Wow, isn't that so great? Good shit. And anyway, the bragging about crunch thing is just, within 6 years, there's never been a single day where anyone worked in a work-life balance mode. This is bad. Anyway, there's been a day and night fight to ship a project of the scale of Call of Duty built by an independent studio, and you're not paying people on time. Now, they shouldn't be crunching. They shouldn't be, but they are, and you're not paying them on time. You have to wonder, is he paying overtime either? I doubt it. But this thrown in at the end, Gunzilla's acquisition of Game Informer. I knew Game Informer had been acquired by like a blockchain NFT bro thing. I hadn't realized these were the same too. Off the Grid is a blockchain Web3 piece of shit game. So yeah, we're crypto bros being shady. I'm shocked. This is my shocked face. Anyway, so some of the rest of these articles are largely about generative AI and the Crimson Deserts placeholder thing. So I was talking about it last time I was on, that a bunch of devs had put out like, this is what we use for placeholders in our games, and for why generative AI is one, not a good use for it, and two, not a good excuse for it either. Because you want your placeholders to be glaringly obvious. You don't want them to be almost looking like the right thing if you just glance at it. So you've got things like, putting Bambi in Pentiment and putting this like doodle guy in there and this kind of stuff, like literally calling the guy sucks and stuff like that. Having a makeshift UI, like your health bar and here's where the bullets will go and stuff like that. This is placeholder fish that they had in one of their games. But the point of all of these things was the placeholders are obvious, glaring, and easily spotted before you go to make the game itself. And that this statement on it is, if it's true, it's extremely bad practice for your placeholders to almost look like the thing you want it to look like anyway. And if you're not tracking it, that's even worse. But the other side of it is that they weren't placeholders at all, and they just didn't give a shit, and they used generative AI to make it. This is because you're not going to get this thing, but the guy didn't have a sound effect for like walking yet. So he just has Alucard from Castlevania shouting "what" every 2 seconds, but the pitch is randomized. It's very dumb. But again, very obvious that it's a placeholder and something you need to remove. Got this stick figure guy, blame Jonas for this, like this texture's not there, all this kind of stuff. Like horrible memes, just putting memes in your game. Like, this is a placeholder and so on. this cat texture that they applied to a building. They're all very, very dumb, but the point of every single one of them is, this is quite obviously not meant to be in the game. And it just makes Crimson Desert's thing feel like lies, basically. But they said they're removing it, and as far as I'm aware, their latest patch did remove it, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Anyway, speaking of AI, the Warhorse developer claims they were fired and replaced with AI. Good shit. So this is a former, I think they're a translator. Terminated without warning as their job was being replaced by AI is a Czech to English translator and editor at the studio since July 2022, primarily working on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Max H expressed feelings betrayed by the company's management. Yesterday, with no forewarning, I was invited to a meeting and promptly told that in an effort to make the company more effective and save finances, definitely the second one, as of next month, my position at the company would become obsolete in favor of using AI for all translations going forward. This came as a huge shock to me, as though the discussion about using AI for translating had frequently come up in the past. Something I was always strongly and vocally against, but never to the extent that it might actually cost me my job in the future. It had, of course, crossed my mind many times, but I naively thought my work at Warhorse was valued enough that I might not be at immediate risk. It's clearly they didn't find it as valuable. But it's one of those, it has to be questionable if they were so vocal about being against it that they might have been targeted for it. We don't know that. Anyway, what we do know, though, is that the games director, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, has been like all in on supporting generative AI. He was very like, yes, DLSS 5 will be in Kingdom Come Deliverance 3 or whatever. Like, he was very much like gung-ho on it. So it's not exactly outside the realms that they may have been laid off for it. But as far as I'm aware, this hasn't been confirmed. And likely never will be. Continuing with the AI stuff though, Always Online RTS has to quickly patch in offline mode after server provider ditches them for AI. So we got a brand new way for generative AI to be shit and to ruin video games. Online multiplayer provider for Stormgate has been bought out by an AI company, and therefore the game will lose access to those servers. Since Stormgate is an always online game, the game will be unplayable. So they are working on a patch to make it playable in offline mode. Our server orchestration partner has been bought up by an AI company. Resources will be applied to supporting AI services, which means the game won't be being supported anymore. And it's fun to learn about a new way in which AI is going to ruin everything. That's right. Anyway, so the end of April, end of this month, the game won't connect to servers anymore. This will prevent players from playing the game completely as it stands, because the game is currently only an online game. Frost Giant, the developer, are patching the game right now so that it can be played offline before that happens, but online multiplayer obviously won't be a thing until they find a new server provider. We hope to restore online playing in a future patch, but this work will be dependent on Frost Giant finding a partner to support ongoing operations, and as I said earlier, getting investors and server providers, components, and so on. They're all locked up in the same land grab, as it were, for generative AI. And it's extremely difficult to compete with the kind of money that Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook can throw around. Anyway, however, fans have been looking for an offline mode since the game came out, more or less. So the lack of an offline mode has been something the community around Stormgate has been complaining about for quite some time now, and it's somewhat annoying, frustrating, telling that it required something that would make the game completely unplayable for them to decide to make an offline patch, and not just the community wanting one. No, it had to be like an existential threat to the game, to them making money. That's what got them to actually make an offline patch. Anyway, speaking of Amazon, I suppose I can use that. Amazon Luna has stopped offering individual games and subscriptions from third-party stores. What the fuck is Amazon Luna, I hear you asking? Amazon Luna is Google Stadia, basically, but make it Amazon. It is a game streaming platform. And up until recently, you were able to connect your Luna account to the EA, Ubisoft, and GOG stores. Any games you bought on those would then be playable through the Luna service. So allowing players to play them without installing them to their PC. So the idea is you are renting out a cloud PC effectively to play your games, which was essentially what Google Stadia was. However, starting already April 10th, Amazon Luna will no longer offer the ability to buy games and third-party subscriptions through those 3 stores. So you won't be able to access EA, Ubisoft, GOG games. Any of those games you have bought will stop being accessible after 10th of April. Previously purchased titles, you'll still own them on those stores. So if you still go to GOG, go to the EA store, the Ubisoft Plus, whatever it's called, and you'll still be able to download and play them, but you'll obviously need a PC that can run them. And arguably the reason you subscribe to Amazon Luna is because you don't have a PC that can run them. So you now effectively don't have access to your library anymore is the issue. While technically you do, you also can't use them for the service you signed up for. And that was marketed to you and may have arguably been the reason you did so in the first place. So what's taking its place? It's going to more or less pivot entirely to what Google Stadia was. It's a subscription-based model. It's whatever games are on that service, that's what you'll be able to play. How many games that is, I don't know. As far as I can recall, it's not very robust. But this does seem like a precursor to Amazon just ditching the whole thing entirely. We'll see. Sounds like that's where they're going, though. Anyway. And then a kind of roundup thing. So this is from John and Brendan Romero, who sat down for a fireside chat at something a while ago. And they're basically recalling that they were there in the 1980s video game industry crash. Just when Atari put out the ET game. And it was for a lot of money and nobody bought it. And that was effectively the end of video game investment for a very long time. Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. The video game industry was in a downward turn anyway, and the ET game just was the straw that broke the camel's back. But it wasn't like just that one thing that killed us. You can go into the history lesson. The point is, they were around at the time, and they're basically saying that this is worse. Cool. So the gist of the talk was them like talking about their careers in general, but it came up with them having the game that John Romero's company is currently working on, where they were in partnership with some unknown, unnamed third-party publisher. It's Microsoft. They never said it was Microsoft, but it was Microsoft. Anyway, faced with a sudden rug pull, the studio had to downsize dramatically. John and Brenda reflected on the hardships they faced over the past year and the state of the industry more generally. So from Brenda, I feel like the industry's in a really horrible place. We were there in the 80s for the crash, and this is definitely crashier. There are so few people that have not been affected, or their partners affected, or they're worried about being affected. It's a really difficult time right now. John Romero pointing out that Battlefield 6 did really, really well, only for EA to make layoffs in the studio behind it. I don't understand what that's all about. It's greed. Greed is what it's all about. And Brenda, again, this is really one of those times where I don't know. And you hear behind the scenes, there's tremendous push towards teams using generative AI. There's tremendous push back from teams and from gamers about using generative AI. And before you ask, we're not using generative AI, so I don't know. So it's really just a question on where they think the industry is going. I know that we're going to be okay for the next little bit. And if something falls over sideways and 2027 is another exciting year, well, we've both had a good run. And there's a little article of them saying that Romero's games had been shut down. They hadn't been shut down. They just downsized significantly. Anyway, the rest of this article is pretty good interview summation of it. But the kind of interesting tidbit is this is worse than the 80s video game crash, which is kind of at the time was seen as like that could have ended video games entirely as a medium. And this is worse. Well, this is crashier, whether you want to attribute the word crashier to also the word worse. I do, but, you know, crashier isn't actually a word. So anyway, moving on. And then to round it out, I probably should have put these in a different order, but whatever. Anyway, so Take-Two lays off head of AI and multiple team members. So the generative AI thing is kind of going all over the place. Now, this hasn't been corroborated, so I haven't gone too deep into this article, but it's alleged that Take-Two were working on some kind of generative AI tool to see if it could be leveraged into some of their games. And the gist of this article is that it didn't, or it wasn't reliable enough, or something. Again, wasn't corroborated by Take-Two themselves, so we don't really know. But they've laid off that team. The team had been there for about a year, and I guess the assumption was whatever they were building wasn't good enough for Take-Two, or maybe they needed to free up personnel or something. But it's interesting that, you know, GTA 6 is Take-Two's baby. It's going to be a big flagship game if it ever comes out. A standard, if you like, standard bearer for the industry, for them to be not just eschewing generative AI, but like very much walking it back, like very much distancing themselves from it entirely, is a kind of interesting comparison to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Stormgate's losing their server because generative AI, and where's the one where there's no money, like no money because they're all jumping at the generative AI thing, and yet the guys making GTA 6 are like, no generative AI, please. They're interesting conflicting points, or contra points, if you like. Anyway, that's the video game industry, what's happening in the community. So this is Stop Killing Games, which is a initiative, community-led initiative to basically have games that are always online, to, when they sunset their games, to have some kind of offline version so the game can still be played. Was originally brought up from the game The Crew, a Ubisoft racing game that went offline, and there's zero way to play it now. There are like fan attempts to get those servers turned into like peer-to-peer things, but it's a bit wobbly at the moment. Point is, there's no legitimate way to play it offline anymore. And this article is basically highlighting like Highguard. There's absolutely no way to play that game anymore. And it came out and just died immediately. Concord in the same way. There's no real way to play it. But then basically saying that just because the game didn't do well, or just because the game didn't do well enough, you know, in terms of like something like Battlefield or whatever, that's not a good enough reason to make the game unplayable forever. Like, this is a tremendous amount of effort, a tremendous amount of work goes into making those games, and the idea that you can just put it in the bin and no one will know anything about it is just extremely disrespectful of the entire medium. Anyway, I've not played Highguard. I don't need to play Highguard to not want it to die. Someone out there loves Highguard. There is value there: music, narrative, environmental design. The idea that a developer can pour so much time into something and for it to end up as someone's favorite game, just for that person to be told it's going away forever and they can never play it again, that sucks. It really sucks. And that's kind of the gist of where I was with it too. Biggest benefit that Stop Killing Game has in terms of remaining in the cultural zeitgeist is that games keep dying. The thing we are trying to stop keeps happening. Every time it happens, someone's favorite game is going offline forever. Someone is losing their favorite piece of art. Someone will say to that person, I wish we could stop killing games. Even if it's not necessarily your favorite, even if it's not like top 10, top 20, top 500, whatever, that's still not a good enough reason to make it completely inaccessible forever and ever. And that's kind of the gist of it. But the kind of ironic idea is that the whole idea for Stop Killing Games is to stop killing games, but the way they're able to stay relevant is because it just keeps fucking happening, and it's... I don't even know. There's a word for it. I think that's Kafkaesque. I don't know. I need to look that up. Anyway, the opposite side, or not even the opposite side, maybe like a sister argument to the Stop Killing Games thing, is how do you preserve it if the game is killed immediately? But jumping off that, the generative AI DLSS 5 thing, what version of the game do you preserve? Because these models that will be applied to like the filter might change over time. It might change depending on how good your PC is and so on. But the point of it is that it's de facto not what the developer intended it to look like. So from a game's preservation standpoint, which version do you preserve? Do you preserve the thing without DLSS 5? Do you preserve the thing with DLSS 5 with a game, with a machine that's like okay? Or with a machine that's really powerful? With a machine that's stupidly powerful? Like, which version do you preserve? Which version is the version of the game? And adding all of these additional wrinkles makes it like, which fucking one am I meant to preserve? If these new AI technologies become essential for making and playing games, it has the potential to not only add another layer of potential copyright complexity, but bring into question what version of a game should be preserved. Do we preserve both DLSS off and on? Is the DLSS 5 version consistent amongst players? It isn't. And if not, what version represents the collective experience? Do you have to then average it out even further? Averaging a thing that's already an average, can't imagine it's going to look great. Experiences and intent from both the maker and the player changes significantly with this tech, which impacts curatorial justifications and interpretations. In an exhibition context, how do you present this text with the game? This tech, rather, with the game? If you must display it, is the maker's intent or the audience's collective memory being compromised? So if the audience's collective memory is that it looked like this yassified thing, whereas the developer is like, no, this was how we made it. Like, which one are you meant to show in the exhibit? You know, do you display the Roman bust of Nero or whatever in the exhibit, or you display the guy who like chiseled in a jawline and gave him a chin? And what is that the one you're meant to? No, the original is the one you're meant to preserve. Anyway, a painting isn't automatically better if it has more colors, and a video game isn't automatically better if it has more pixels. Yes. Very good. Correct. Continuing on, peak devs call out entitled gamers who want endless free updates. So this was like a little bit of a hot button thing. It was basically people saying that the developers behind Peak were lazy because they weren't putting out like new updates. They weren't keeping the game going with like new shit every month, every 2 months, like something like Fortnite might do. And the developers basically coming back to say, fuck off. They didn't quite say fuck off, but that's kind of what they said. Free updates are a bonus and not a right. The original tweet was calling the teams lazy, has since been deleted because they absolutely got dogpiled for it. But anyway, I'm mad at Landfall for their lazy dev cycle for Peak when they could be doing so much more with it considering they're ending development of it this year. So this idea that because you made a game, and because it's an online game, that means it has to be alive forever and ever and ever and can never end. And the response to it was basically, this is not what games are. Like, the Fortnites and so on are an aberration in the video game industry. Games are not meant to last forever and ever. Films don't last forever and ever. Books don't last forever and ever. Can you imagine a song that just doesn't end? This is the song that never ends. It just goes on and on. I'm not going to sing the whole thing. We'll be here forever. Anyway, Peak has had so many updates, though. Neither Landfall or Aggro Crab are live service studios. Any update is a bonus and not a right. But again, they're trying to say like this is how the games industry work these days. Landfall pointed out that the industry used to be no updates, just release it as is. We have gone way beyond that. Said it before and I'll say it again. Not every game needs to be a live service forever game, and most of the games industry's history, that's just not how things worked. Studios would make games, launch them, and then move on. And that is the vast majority of games that are considered the cultural pinnacle of the medium. You know, all of them have a beginning, middle, and end. All of them. Every single one. Moving on. Again, if you thought generative AI couldn't ruin things even further, just wait. There's more. YouTuber receives copyright strike for Silent Hill 2 playthrough from makers of 2 AI-generated Silent Hill 2 songs. Makers is doing some heavy lifting here. Anyway, the gist of this is a YouTuber had a Silent Hill 2 playthrough going around, and they received copyright strikes because Kira Yamaoka's Promise appears in the game because it's a Silent Hill 2 track, so of course it's going to show up. Got copyright claims, and you would assume the copyright claims would come from either Konami or Akira Yamaoka. Didn't come from either of them. Came from two randos. Neither artist is actually Akira Yamaoka or Konami or Bloober Team or anybody like that. They are in fact two different channels that had AI-generated versions of Akira Yamaoka songs, and they slapped an AI-generated vocal over it. It's pretty gross. Pretty gross. And anyone listening to it would say that's not that song. You shouldn't be able to copyright strike it, but because of the way YouTube works, YouTube has automatically sided with the copyright claimers because YouTube's copyright system is fucking shit. Anyway, they got a strike by somebody called Agro Memos. The track that Agro Memos strike is protecting is a very blatant copy of Promise with an AI-generated voiceover on top of it. The second one is basically the exact same. It's just a different user, but they actually literally called the game, or called the track Promise. They're like not even trying to hide it, not even trying to disguise it. But YouTube lets it happen because YouTube is a fully copyright maximalist thing. It's just, you make a copyright claim, it automatically goes up. It's automatic strike. You only have 3 strikes on your account. And if you try to appeal it, you go into Google's hell of automated responses of robots talking to other robots, and it just gets rejected. And the rejection could even act as another strike. So that's good shit. One weird wrinkle, though, is that the music for these tracks was provided to YouTube by the Orchard Enterprise. Orchard Enterprises has worked with Sony Music Entertainment in the past. This could be a weird thing in that, like, Promise by Akira Yamaoka may have been supplied by Sony Music Entertainment, and that might have been given to Orchard Enterprises, and then the AI-generated version is also pulling that caption from the same thing. I don't know. They could have AI-generated the whole fucking upload as well. But the copyright abuse in this case is only possible because of YouTube's lax automatic strike system. They just don't side with the creator in any way whatsoever, unless the creator themselves is Sony Music Entertainment. I did think it's just funny that this exact same system allowed an Italian broadcaster's video talking about DLSS 5 was used to take down NVIDIA's video of DLSS 5. Now it's since gone back up, but the exact same system. And NVIDIA were able to fight it because they're NVIDIA and they have that money. Right. Anyway, we'll leave Ratcoin to play in the background. Anyway, that was your news for the 23rd of March to the 12th, I think, of April 2026. Obviously, that's not a weekly news recap. That was a tri-weekly? Tri-weekly? Is tri-weekly once every 3 weeks or 3 times a week? No, thrice weekly would be 3 times a week. So tri-weekly? Again, anyway, I've been away last 2 weekends, so I haven't really had a chance to do these videos, and doing these videos midweek, it's just I don't have the energy after work. So it tends to be something I need to record on the weekend. If I don't have the weekend to record it, it doesn't get done. So we'll hopefully be back to weekly after this. Anyway, some interesting updates there from the Xbox Partner Showcase and the AAA initiative. Some interesting games shown off there. New releases, not like a huge number, like Ratcoin, sure, but I find these kind of games a little insidious. You know, they do lend themselves a little too well to just like one more run. This time I'll do it. Like one more go, bro. One more go, bro. Just put me back in, bro. And yeah, I know from my own gameplay or my own game playing habits that would mean I'd be playing the game until like 4 a.m. or something. So I need to stay away from them, basically. Legacy of Kain Ascendance, I have since finished. It's not great game. Like, it's fun to get those story beats back to back, and not have to play through the entire series again. Like, I'm going to play through the entire series again, but again, from like a jumping off point, it's a little bit hard to say that you could play Legacy of Kain Ascendance and understand the story, because you really wouldn't. You get some of the highlights, I guess, but there's so much additional detail that's missing, that's incredibly necessary to understand the story, that I just feel like it didn't do what it set out to do. And it does introduce a new character, and if they decide to keep going with this timeline, sure, I'd play another game. I'd play a sequel. Like, I think it was decent enough that I'd play a sequel, but if it's meant to like sit in as an explainer, I don't think it does a good enough job, to be honest. Anyway, yeah, industry news, not, it's all pretty grim. It's all like layoffs and studios using generative AI in ways they shouldn't be, and having Take-Two like maybe shutting down a generative AI team because they felt it wasn't good enough, or was it just a case of we just want the cash instead of paying for this kind of stuff? I don't know, because again, they never corroborated the story, so we don't know. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there. Trying to do a recap on it, I don't think it's gonna work, and my brain is too tired to do it. So I'm just gonna skip to the end. We'll skip to the end. That was your news. I'll be back next week. Hopefully, we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming at that point. Let me know in the comments, sure, if there's something you wanted to discuss more, or if I missed anything, because there was 3 weeks of news. I'm sure I did. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.